this thing on?
We talking about practice, man.
Yeah, I work with my hands. It's a misdemeanor in 27 states.
You gotta be comfortable with your co-host in this amount of space.
Yeah, I can see me and you.
This guy runs a state.
You get that through your head?
You just got hashtag content.
You know, technology and stuff.
Open your grill. It's stuck in your teeth.
Now I have to mark them so I don't get the lick mic.
You're not really that stupid, are you?
Quavos.
I'm just here so I won't get fined.
We'd have a lot of editing this time.
The ceiling is the roof. Let's make it happen.
It was a record-setting week at the U.S. Open, but do we really care?
FOTS Tommy Martin of WIVB in Buffalo will be saying words, but not one, but two NHL drafts this week.
Plus, we're cleaning off the gridiron until the end of summer. FOTS Mark Ludwiczak breaking down a rather large minicamp.
2 Orangemen and a Rochesterian walk into a draft. Way to go.
To be determined, episode 16 previously recorded from the studio in Mom's basement. Sports by Bond, Stephen Bond, along with the always lovely, the always energetic, the always dashing, at Trabs Matt.
That's me, Doc Lee, dude. It's me, Doc Lee.
Matt Traybold. Previously recorded in upstate New York. As I mentioned, it is episode 16, so we are officially in, what, month 4 now? Is that the way this goes? My goodness.
God, 4 months.
And you're not sick of me yet.
Well.
It's getting there, I'm sure. We appreciate everyone listening in. You can find the show, To Be Determined, on Twitter at TBD_show, on Instagram, To Be Determined Show. You can email the show, tbdmailman@gmail.com. Anything else we should promote right off the beginning here?
My Twitter account again, maybe?
At Trabs Matt.
Yep. Okay, good.
Okay.
We're good.
All right, we're good then. Let's dive into it then at Trabs Matt. What is the word this week?
Golf, hockey, football.
I kind of want to just know how you're doing. That's all. I didn't,
Hey.
It's all right. It's all right. Yeah.
Hey now.
What is planned on the show? The Buffalo Bills wrapped up minicamp. We're talking gridiron with FOTS Mark Ludwiczak. The Sabres have a new bench boss, and it's, right before we're a couple days away from the expansion draft and then the entry draft.
Whew.
As you mentioned, we'll be talking with Tom Martin. And we have a 117th United States Open champion, but do we really care? So what are we going to try to determine today? Did we really care about this U.S. Open? What do we make of the expansion draft? What do we make of the unprotected players that the Sabres have? And what did we make of Bill's minicamp? Did we learn anything? Do we gain any insight from these off-season workouts? We'll discuss that amongst ourselves, meaning at Sports by Bond and at Trabs Matt, and then we'll discuss it with FOTS as well. So we begin where the timeline should begin in terms of timeliness, and that is the United States Open. 117th, Brooks Koepka wins it by 4 strokes. 16 under par, shot a 67, 5 under on the day on this 4th day, but was it exciting? Do we really care?
And we were talking about this earlier when it comes to, yes, you can make a case one way or the other. Is it better to have Cinderella kind of guys, which all 4 days, this U.S. Open was chock full of at the top of the leaderboard, or established names, big names? Me, I don't care either way. I like a little bit of both. I don't really have qualms about either. But I would like to see it be competitive, at least with a couple guys late on Sunday.
That's why I just wanted to jump in and piggyback off that point. If it's competitive, I don't care who it is.
Yeah.
But it just didn't feel competitive to me. It never felt to me like this was a competitive match. And I want to read you a statistic I found. For the first time since the World Golf Rankings were introduced in 1986, the top 3 golfers missed the cut. So Jason Day, Rory, and DJ, Dustin Johnson, all missed the cut. And that, to me, is why it was boring. Not only did we not have a competitive round, we didn't have the star power. So if you're not going to have a competitive round of golf, give me the star power then. Brooks Koepka's a nice story, but Koepka, whatever his last name is.
The latter.
It just didn't. He didn't interest me. There's nothing there that I'm like, oh, that's great. What a great story with him.
And it's so ironic that, Brooks Koepka, a big storyline since he's really been killing it this week, and it was pretty early on. It wasn't somebody who came on late. Was that he's this big-time friend for a good amount of time now with Dustin Johnson. And Dustin Johnson misses the cut.
Yeah.
As I think he's number one.
He is.
Numero uno
He's
in
the
the World
number
Golf
one ranked,
rankings.
yep.
It's very unfortunate.
First time at Erin Hills. What did you make of the golf course?
I think the weather played into it a little bit, but it's a tightrope with these architects for these golf courses. You don't want it being too hard because then you get gripes from the golfers themselves.
Yep.
You don't want it to be too easy, kind of like this time around. I'm not saying easy is the right adjective for it, but it definitely gets talked about with how low the scores were. And you have just about everybody else having a problem with it. So it's hard. It's a tightrope, like I said.
It is. U.S. Opens typically, they want them to be around par. We weren't even close to that. 16 under, you're running away with it, basically. And he didn't, because it was only a four-stroke win over Hideki Matsuyama. It just, I don't know. To me, this wasn't as exciting. Now, were other majors exciting? Yes. So this is where it's that catch-22. The last 7 major champions winners are all first-time major champion winners. So we've had parity in golf, but nobody watches when there's parity. And you can point to Tiger.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Eyeballs are on golf when one guy is dominating the sport.
And it's impressive to a certain degree because a lot of times you see in these tournaments somebody who's really good the first couple of days, which was Brooks Koepka, not be able to have the longevity through all 4 days. But that is not the case. Maybe in the middle 2, but man, he came with a vengeance this time around. But like a Jamie Lovemark, he was big on the first day. Patrick Reed was really good yesterday. He ends at 8 under. You're like, oh, he's going to be in the mix. And then gets a lot of really good late rounds. Or people that were teeing off later did very well. And he came in the day 4 shots back after Captain America really killed it on day 3. But a lot of it is, I think there's a lot of overnight rain. It made the very low scores, I should say. Low scores because the greens were more manageable. But Erin Hills, I don't think should have too many worries.
Some of those bunkers were nasty looking.
Oof.
It almost looked like the Open Championship.
After Earth, yeah.
It really did. It almost looked like over in Britain.
It's apocalyptic with all that. It was absurd.
Craziness.
Some of the wide shots going into these greens.
Yeah. I wouldn't have wanted to get into the beach in any of that stuff. I'd just been chucking it out.
Like
if it was me.
If it wasn't going to be an American when I wanted to be Hideki Matsuyama, I'm glad he was up there towards the top because Memphis Chris, I forgot his last name, but was the ESPN Memphis radio station with that awesome song. I know you've listened to it. FOTS Prescott Rossi was enlightening us about it. He goes, Hideki Matsuyama.
Yeah, okay.
Love it.
All right, let's jump to hockey. The Sabres have hired their 18th head coach in franchise history, Phil Housley, a former draft pick. We talked about this on the Friday show. I think we both like the hire, and it seems to be a hire that fans like, and it seems to be a hire that the media likes. We'll see what the players think. But early on, it seems to be a win for Jason Botterill.
And the word I'm always going to be coming away with, I'm not sure how long, if I remember for the rest of my life. That might be hyperbole. But I'm going to remember for a very long time because I was there at the KeyBank Center when it happened. Just a guy of his age saying, I'm pumped. The fact that he came full circle, he was so excited to be back on this team that gave him so much as a player.
Just to clarify, you were at the introductory press conference for Housley.
Yes, where he said,
his head coach.
I'm pumped.
Yeah.
He hit those P's so hard. I'm pumped.
Nice. All right, so now we move to the expansion draft, as that's what's upcoming this week on Wednesday. Some of the notable names that were left unprotected, Marc-Andre Fleury, James Neal, but a couple other goalies, a couple other key pieces out there. Cam Ward for the Hurricanes, left unprotected. Michael Neuwirth, left unprotected of the Flyers. And the last one I thought was really interesting, the Red Wings not protecting Peter Mrazek.
I mean, and a lot of the guys...
That's a guy that started for them.
A lot of the big names that were left on these lists were big names, but older guys with some not super favorable contracts. That's not the case as much with him. So it's very surprising to see that.
What's interesting around this time, because we don't get expansion drafts every year, they're once in a blue moon that we get expansion drafts, is what you'll see is teams have more players on their roster than protection picks. So there's more guys they want to keep than what they can protect. And in this instance, they could either protect a goalie, 3 defensemen, and 7 forwards, or they could protect a goalie and 8 skaters if you wanted to protect a 4th defenseman. So we saw Nashville protecting 4 defensemen. We saw the Sabres protecting 3 defensemen and 7 skaters, and then the goalie and Leonard. The Vegas general manager was the former Washington Capitals general manager, George McPhee. He's been around a while. Reportedly has deals in place with 4 teams. I don't know, at the time we're recording this podcast on Sunday night, nothing reported close to the Sabres in terms of a deal. So who did they leave unprotected? Well, some interesting names, not necessarily huge names, guys that maybe you'd expect. The big one that jumps off the page is Linus Ullmark, the Amerks goalie, and a guy that has competed up with the big club when, Ullmark was hurt, or not Ullmark, when Leonard was hurt, when Leonard was hurt. So he's seen some time, and he's thought of as maybe that next generation goalie for the Sabres. And then William Carrier, a guy that started his career in Rochester and has worked his way up. He's been a nice energy piece. He's been a good 3rd, 4th line piece. He's not a top 6 guy in my estimation.
And I think you make sure to protect a guy who is known to wear goalie buckets with the minions on it. And that's what Ullmark brings to the table. But quick question for you before we go to other NHL drafts, because there's actually 2 of them this week. So the Tony Baselli Award. So that is the first ever Houston Texan. He was the first expansion draft pick for them, came over from the Jaguars. Who do you think the Tony Baselli pick is going to be for the Vegas Golden Knights?
The first overall pick?
Yeah.
There was
You're a big hockey guy.
I know there was a lot of talk that it was going to be Marc-Andre Fleury, but I think he's old. That's a good question. There are some interesting guys out there. Bobby Ryan comes to mind.
That'd probably be me.
James Neal comes to mind. James Neal's older, so Bobby Ryan I think is more.
I think I have to agree with you on that, Bobby Ryan.
So those 2, but listen, and then you look at goalies. Could Marc-Andre Fleury? Yeah, but I could also see Peter Mrazek being that guy too. So I know I'm not. If I had to pick a guy, I would go Bobby Ryan. That would be my guy.
And somebody like I don't follow the NHL as much as you do, and Bobby Ryan just jumps off the page.
It's a name that you know then, so
yeah,
even more so.
Or the bottom line on ESPN earlier tonight.
Yeah, that it does. All right. As far as the actual entry draft is concerned, the Sabres holding the 8th overall pick, and we'll talk with FOTS Tom Martin about who he thinks is going to be out there and where the Sabres should go. My initial thought is they need to go defense.
Yeah, and gosh, you seem to talk about it every week, and rightfully so. It's blue line, blue line, blue line. And you just look at the roster in terms of legitimate names on the roster at that position and just need some help there.
Now, at 8, like we learned last year with the Sabres, that 8th overall pick is not going to play year 1 with Buffalo. It may not even play year 2. I think this draft, as you'll hear from FOTS Tom Martin, is talented, deep, but not heavy on the top end talent. Meaning
in terms of the
right top
now.
guys are not going to be right. They're not going to be available right away. So it's a wait and see process. They're prospects, and that's what you get with 18-year-old kids. Is that they're prospects? I mean, that's what it was with Sam Reinhart. Now Eichel was a different case. So you can't expect that at 8. A couple of guys to maybe keep your ears out for: Swedish defenseman, and I'm going to butcher this last name, Timothy Liljegren.
I think what we for the pronunciation we found was Liljegren.
Liljegren. Sorry, it's bad. Others include Mira Heiskanen, and I believe he is. Actually, I don't know his origin. I didn't write it down.
Sounds Eastern European.
It's probably. It's not. It was
what
bad,
a stretch that is.
Bad job on me. Either way, but
Finnish, Swedish.
I had it here underneath it, and this will just to get it rolling. Either way, the Sabres need help on the blue line. Is what I had there. So
in summation,
not good on you from me in that point. But they have to go defense. Listen, we're learning in the NHL game today that the value is now in defense. Is finding good young defensemen, and we know the story. I talked about it on the Friday show. The Sabres traded away a very good young defenseman to try and make the postseason, last year. I thought they should have held on to Mark Pysyk. But they traded him away. So we don't have to dive into that again. But
now, what Eastern European country is this prospect I assume you were talking about a second ago, not Godania? Who's not Godania?
No.
That Godania kid's really good.
It's not good on me. It's not good on me. All right, let's jump to the Bills. Here's the question. What needs to be addressed in training camp? What did we learn from minicamp? Did we learn anything? We learned that Sammy is on the way to being healthy.
En route,
That
yeah.
there wasn't any setbacks with him, that he had flashes of that Sammy brilliance, and that he didn't get hurt. And that's the main thing. That last part about him not getting hurt is all we really care about.
And it's not just because in terms of what the media gets to see in these practices, in these mini camps leading up to what's going to be a 6-week, well, not necessarily lull, but before they really have to be all together at the same time in training camp at St. John Fisher College in Rochester. So one of the big takeaways you're going to get, because it's what is actually able to be shown, is quarterbacks thrown to receiving core. But on top of that, Sammy Watkins has had those injury issues, and that's something that they lost a lot of guys. No more Goodwin, no more Robert Woods. So I think it's pretty fitting to say that's what I really want to see addressed, or at least clarified a little bit going over into the training camp times.
We'll talk with Mark Ludwiczak about that. What needs to be addressed in training camp? I mean, a lot at this point.
Yeah. I would say definitely receiving core and defensive backfield.
You assume the roster is set at this point for the most part. That there may be a couple of pieces here and there that could fall to them, but you don't expect, and you can't expect anything
super substantial.
Yeah, you just, I was going to say
heavy hitters,
shocking,
yeah.
but yes, substantial is the better way to put it. So this is what you got. This is going to be the 2017 Buffalo Bills, and really what it comes down to is, can this first-year head coach get this group to 9-10 wins on the year? Is this a 10-win team? I think that's the benchmark. If I had to look at it, forget the playoffs, and I know that's the big thing because it's been 17 years. Forget that. Is this team a 10-win team? Because if you get to 10, now you've improved substantially over the past several years of this franchise.
I really got to see him during training camp.
And that's the hard part. Preseason, really.
I mean, McDermott has been given so much in the way of control right off the bat before even coaching his first game.
Yeah.
Not just as a head coach with the Bills, but as a head coach in the NFL. So he's gonna have to, if he's gonna be keeping this job long term. You'd have to think, hopefully.
I think you take a look at the wide receiver battle.
Mm-hmm.
I think you take a look at how the linebackers develop. I think that's going to be a key. We had injuries at linebacker last year.
That's very
the Bills
true.
Did
See what Ragland can do.
You see how Ragland looks. And then you keep your eye on the defensive backs.
Yes.
That's an entirely different group outside of Ronald Darby. Darby's the only
very
returning player in that DB room. So how does Trey White look? Well, early on, and you saw him, Matty, at that third day of minicamp. He's lived up to the billing so far, it looks like.
Yeah. Electric. It's electric. There we go.
Okay.
Got it the second time.
Okay. We might actually be fine for that, so we got to be careful. We do not own the rights to that song.
Well, luckily I didn't sing it that well.
So, yes, we will talk to... no, that is the wrong bump music
Oh,
there.
but I like it. Let it roll, baby.
That's for the end of the show. That's not the right stuff. We need that one. There we go. We will talk to Mark Ludwiczak coming up shortly, but around this bump music, FOTS Tommy Martin will talk about his podcast. We'll talk about the Sabres. We'll talk a lot of things with Tom Martin of WIVB. It's all hockey related in the B block. Stick around. It's next on TBD.
These are my words. Those are your ears. Let it happen. We're back here on To Be Determined.
At Sports by Bond, at Trabs Matt, at 4TomMartin. Is that the Twitter handle?
For them things.
You got it, yeah.
Golly,
little,
all
right. Promotion for the news channel. But it could be for me as well.
It's true. It could be for Tom Martin. His tweets are just for him, no one else.
Hopefully at least me. I like them.
Well, all right. I enjoy them too. Tom Martin, WIVB, sports anchor reporter out in Buffalo. FOTS friend of the show. What's going on, Tommy?
Not too much. Wrapping up a anchor sesh tonight, and then I'm off the next 2 days, and I'm not going to talk about sports because my dad's in town and he hates them.
Oh,
really?
That's very interesting.
That's the thing. He doesn't hate them, but he's not a huge fan.
That's interesting.
very
And you
interesting.
ended up in this profession.
I did. I don't want to think about why that is. I just sort of accept it.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or don't something. I don't know.
All right.
You had it.
Tom covers an array of sports for IVB, but is, for lack of a better term, I guess, the beat reporter kind of sort of for IVB of the Sabres.
Yeah.
And the co-host of the Oddcast podcast.
Oddcast podcast.
I said that very awkwardly. I just realized that.
We're in Britain, eh? Oddcast podcast.
I develop. Never mind.
Yeah.
We'll avoid that and go into the actual business of the hour. The expansion draft is this upcoming week. All the protection lists are out. Were there any surprises for the Sabres?
For the Sabres, no. I think once they made the move for Nathan Beaulieu, you knew Zach Bogosian would be exposed. And even then, I think the only reason you would have kept him is because of the lack of depth they have anyway. I don't think they like his contract. And if you can count on one thing that Jason Botterill wants to do as the new GM there, it's to shave a lot of the not awful, there's probably one awful deal, and that's Matt Molson's, but a lot of the less desirable deals they have there, they're just clogging up space for when he has to sign Jack Eichel to a mega deal. So on that list, I'd say the one surprise maybe was Will Carrier. I had thought maybe they would expose Robin Lehner and keep Ullmark as just a cost-cutting measure, but obviously Botterill thinks that you don't want to just get rid of a guy who could be a number one goaltender, even if he's a bit more expensive. So Carrier, Paul Hamilton, I think rightfully speculated that Carrier might be on there so that George McPhee of the Vegas Golden Knights would leave Ullmark alone and take him instead, and they have some more depth there. So, yeah, I'd say Carrier, who was good, not great, but he's young and he's a tenacious player. I think that's the one surprise.
So as far as the traditional NHL draft is concerned, who are the names Sabres fans should have an eye on?
The entry draft. It's so wide open. You have a wide array this year, and I think if there's one, maybe a couple names to look at. I love this kid named Cale Makar. He is just incredible, and he's going to wind up being the highest drafted player out of the Alberta Junior Hockey League ever, bar none.
Wow.
He's just come out of nowhere, and if you go look at some of the tape he has, just an incredible scorer as a defenseman, loves to move the puck, loves to jump in the play, and that's the one thing Buffalo needs more than anything else on the roster. But Jason Botterill told us the other day he's very much against drafting just because you need this. He wants to go BPA, best player available. Makar might not be that. Let's say Casey Middlestat falls to 8. That's a kid out of Minnesota who could be a real good help at center. Cody Glass I'd keep an eye on as well. And then maybe even a guy like Tim Liljegren, who is he was maybe a top 3 prospect going into the year and had mono and then had a shoulder injury. And it all just kind of went downhill this season. But I think he's got a lot of raw ability. If you remember Jacob Chikrin last year, who was maybe a top 5 guy, he slid to Arizona at pick 15. Could have had the same slide, but he's still a legit player. And then maybe Owen Tippett from Mississauga. Very redheaded. I mean, extremely redheaded winger. Heck of a shot. Crazy, awesome red hair. And he would put Andy Dalton to shame.
Wow, okay.
Whoa.
That's saying something. That is definitely saying something.
And you know what? I love you guys for letting me do this. We're doing all these guys, all these prospects on WIVB.com. It's our premier prospect series. Check it out. Okay, done.
No, that's fine.
Done.
That's fine. You get the plug in there.
Yeah, aggressively crimson. Aggressively crimson.
Aggressively.
Oh, okay. That's
Jet red.
Jet red.
If Harry Potter's was jet black, he's jet red.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
You're throwing it all out there today. Tom Martin, WIVB holds nothing back.
No.
Now, most of these prospects, this is, I think, what fans have trouble with in the NHL draft, is that most of these prospects aren't going to be ready for at least a year down the road. At number 8, the Sabres, and correct me if I'm wrong here, are more than likely not going to get a prospect that's going to jump in the lineup next year?
No. Especially not in this draft. I think this draft you might see a lot of guys who are going to wind up maybe even taking 2 years, if not more. There's a couple guys I think, maybe Owen Tippett could use 3 years before the NHL. It just depends. And some of these kids have really come up, very, without much fanfare and suddenly caught fire the last year. So maybe you think they've suddenly fast-tracked their development. And then they might hit the AHL and stick there for 2 years. So maybe just the top 2 picks, honestly. Patrick and Hischier might be the only guys who you'll see in the league next year if they're even in the league. Much different draft. Very deep, I think, but you do not have near the same NHL readiness or top-level talent you've seen the last couple of years.
So Jason Bachschul's already started to address some of these holes on this roster. What can we expect from their latest addition, Nathan Beaulieu?
Nathan Beaulieu, very happy to be out of Montreal. He was a healthy scratch in the playoffs this year, and he did not like that whatsoever. And the first question he was asked on the conference call with us, were you surprised to be traded? And he goes, no.
Ooh.
And then just like held it. And we're like, oh.
Wow.
Oh, my.
He wanted it out. I think it was pretty clear. And not just because he, I don't think he hated the organization. He just knew that they were not going to give him the same amount of chances with the new coaching staff there as he might have had before. He started last year as the number one guy next to Shea Weber. I mean, he was on that top pairing.
Wow.
And Claude Julien comes in from Boston and just did not like him and what he did. He's a good skater. He said he's excited to play the way Phil Housley wants to play, which is Sabres' new head coach, a guy who helped pioneer the offensive game among defensemen. And I don't think Beaulieu's going to be a guy who comes in and solves the defense. But, he's a restricted free agent who's coming off a $1 million salary per year. He's cheap, and they only paid a third-round pick to get him. So a lot of teams are looking at Sami Vatanen maybe from Anaheim or all those big name, Jonas Brodin maybe. But this guy fills that same role at a much cheaper cost, and it allows Bottrell to do a bit more elsewhere. And there's a ton of holes on this team. He'll come in, he'll be a maybe second pair, third pair guy at best, and that's not bad at all.
Yeah, you can't complain about it for a third-round pick. They sent a third-round pick for the rights just to talk to VZ last year. So this year you're getting something.
and hence that GM is no longer here. So yeah.
Among other things. But yes, no, it makes sense. You mentioned some other holes. What are the other areas this team needs to address?
I mean, outside your top six forwards, there's not much that you love.
Yeah.
I like Robin Lehner, I think, more than most. And if Ullmark is left alone, if they leave poor Linus alone,
that's scary.
I think he's
that's
a good
scary
backup,
thought.
and your goaltender situation is really set. By the way, I do love the fact that we are protecting Evander Kane from Las Vegas, even though he has a house there and will be in Las Vegas, no doubt, plenty this season. Don't think there's anything different from that for him.
Well, I mean, hey, maybe
don't mind him doing it either.
Maybe you put a little bit of bait out there. If things don't go your way in the off season, it's a guy that obviously doesn't mind Vegas. But man, to me, that just would spell disaster for Evander Kane's career. But I guess that's
a debate. I'm cutting the line off there. I'm cutting the debate off there. I'm not going to know what Evander would do in Vegas. No, but outside the top six, and that's assuming you even keep Evander Kane. I mean, Evander Kane might be shipped out for a defenseman, and so then your team is kind of really average all across the fronts, maybe a bit better at forward. So they just need depth. They need to get the AHL back and running. The AHL is a mess. It was under Murray, not that he inherited something great, but they need more prospect depth. And they brought in a guy who came from Pittsburgh, where all these no names came in and made big impacts in the Stanley Cup, and they won. That's what Buffalo needs, or something close to it.
So backing up a few days, Buffalo brings in the former player Phil Housley, 18th head coach of the team. What do you make of the hire?
I like it. Kind of the weird hire where it's like, hey, our first pick would be this guy, from a fan perspective and a media perspective. Honestly, I think he made a lot of sense, and they actually hired him. A guy who was part of a really successful defense unit in Nashville. And granted, that's because they had a lot of really good players. But you still have to take those guys and put them in positions to succeed. And I look at Ryan Ellis as a guy who really had potential as a kid and came up with some fanfare, but took off under Phil Housley. And Phil's like, listen, this is exactly how I played. Play this way. Because you have to think back. I mean, Phil Housley, a lot of Buffalo fans, as it was relayed to me, did not love Phil Housley back in Buffalo, even though he leads the team by defensemen in career points, because he played so finesse and he did not hit people and take penalty minutes, and that's what you wanted back then.
Yeah, he was ahead of his time.
And so, you what?
He was ahead of his time, I think.
He was, and now that's what you want 35 years later. That's what Buffalo desperately needs. So I think it makes sense because there are so many coaches. I mean, Dan Bilesma said he wanted to play fast and up-tempo. It wasn't going to happen. Not the way he coached, not the team they had. Getting Housley here is the first step because he's proven to love to play that way and to know how to do it. Now you have to make a few tweaks to the roster, get Brendan Gooley here whenever he's ready, and get some more speed on the team so you can play the way Housley wants to play. But I like the fact that you're committing to that style in your coach and not just saying you want to do it.
Which player stands to benefit the most from this hiring in Housley?
Gooley. I think Gooley is going to go from a player with a lot of potential to living up to it with him. I just don't see anything wrong there. And it's hard to evaluate what Housley how he'll impact the forwards, because the forwards honestly still put up decent points under Bylsma. Jack Eichel is a point per game player. I'm not going to say Phil Housley's here now he's going to go like 3 points per game. No, it's crazy. But I look at the defense first, and that is the area that needed the most fine tuning. And I'm looking at the guy who is the guy who might go from a decent plug-in in Gooley to maybe living up to and surpassing the expectations they have for him, which is to say he could be a number 2 defenseman on the defense corps and your most dynamic and prolific scoring defenseman.
So we're less than 2 weeks away before Notre Dame goalie Kyle Peterson can test free agency. Any update on him?
They're going to talk again this week. And, I mean, listen, they signed Jonas Johansson. If they signed Olmark to a 2-year deal. Robin Lehner, they're protecting him, so I assume they'll give him maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million a year. Hopefully not 5. You don't want to do that, but if you like him, you do it. That's 3 goaltenders in your roster, and Peterson would slot ahead of Johansson. I don't think ahead of Olmark. Does he want that? Chicago could look at him and say, listen, you've been a Blackhawks fan your whole life. Come be our backup. Yeah. Is he ready for that? Probably not. But there's a lot of – it's going to be like VC. He's going to see – to me, this is my opinion. I haven't talked to the guy or anyone close to him, but I could just see him looking out there and saying, there's just a little bit better opportunity here. What's tying him to Buffalo other than the fact that the previous GM got him? I mean, he has a whole new front office to answer to now and to talk with. And Bottrell pointed that out. It's one of the reasons why Rasmus Asplund is staying in Sweden. The second-round pick from last year is because there's so much change. I think these guys kind of want to wait and see. And for Cal Peterson, wait and see is 2 weeks, and then it's free agency, and it could be at the door.
Yeah, and that makes sense. If you're going to say, okay, you can have Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane in front of you, and you're going to have a chance to go to the playoffs and compete, or you can be with a rebuilding team that may or may not make the postseason next year, it just seems obvious to me that this guy's headed for free agency.
Yeah, and like you said, why not? It's within his rights. Test the waters. If for some reason everyone else just stinks in what they're offering, come play in Rochester next year and you're a starter there. Yeah. And you don't have to flip your expectations in your vision for your career upside down just yet. But right now I could easily see that happening, and I could see them moving forward with Olmark and Lehner, which is not bad at all.
All right, Tommy, plug the podcast, plug the rest of the stuff.
Plug. Here we go. No, first of all, I'll point out I'm a huge fan of this podcast.
Well, thank you, sir.
Be Determined is it's excellent. So
appreciate that.
Seeing as you're already listening, keep listening or watching. I am a co-host with my friend Joe Yurden of NHL.com on the Oddcast. It is our Sabres podcast. Odd is not reference to the Sense. It is reference to the old Buffalo Memorial Auditorium. We should have made that clearer. We could have capitalized maybe odd in the name. I don't know. We could still do that. So
it's not too late.
Yeah, it's a Sabres podcast. We'll probably do it once a week, and we'll have stuff after the draft. We'll be in Chicago. I'll be in Chicago for it. So happy to talk with you guys again then. Happy to have you guys listen to the Oddcast.
Hey,
anyway.
we appreciate it. We appreciate the time. Get yourself a slice of deep dish out there.
Yeah.
Enjoy a baseball game. O'Hare is a fun airport to go through.
I intend to run through it with the speed of Kevin McAllister.
I've sprinted through that airport too many times because that's always where I get connecting flights from. It's awful. It is simply awful.
Hey, and I assume you're an Astros fan. You don't get to see the Cubs as much after the move to the AL. Hey, there you go.
I used to watch Cubs games all the time on WGN growing up, believe it or not. I love the Astros, but I watched just as many Cubs games. And a lot of Mark Grace and Sammy Sosa.
Very nice.
Mizzou Mafia in the house. Tom Martin, WIVB out in Buffalo. We appreciate the time, brother.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys. Take care.
All right, around the corner, we're going to stick with our Buffalo-based FOTS Mark Ludwiczak coming up to talk Bills minicamp following this lengthy bump music.
I'm a do me, you a do you, we a do we. We're back here in to be determined. It's the C Block.
At Sports by Bond with at Traps Matt. Just trying to adjust the music there as we get going to this. We are pleased to be joined by the one and only at Mark Luds12. I believe that's the Twitter handle, Mark Ludwiczak of the Bills Digest, the editor of Bills Digest. Luds, what's going on, buddy?
Not much. How you guys doing?
We're drying off on this Sunday. At least trying to.
Drying off, but it's splendid inside.
It's we've taken shelter as it is just poured in upstate New York.
Yeah, everywhere.
Up and down
Monsoon,
the thruway. So
yeah.
Luds is out in Buffalo, and the weather's no better there, right?
Not at all. It's been up and down all day.
Luds, the editor of Bills Digest, as I mentioned, joins us in a number of different capacities. I think he's joined us in the past for Sabre stuff, if I'm not mistaken, a little hockey talk.
Everything.
And we're bringing him back to talk Bills because Luds spent last week at Bills minicamp, the 3-day session they had. What was it, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday?
Yeah.
Luds, what's one thing from minicamp that we learned that we didn't know before?
Well, I mean, it may be a bit lower on the totem pole when it comes to position battles, but it looks like John Miller's in a bit of a fight for his right guard spot with Vlad Dukas. And if you had money on that before minicamp, you probably would have won something, because I don't think anybody would have thought one of their most improved players from a year ago would be in a position battle coming up here heading into training camp. But I do think it kind of speaks to a larger point that maybe gets overlooked sometimes when there's a new coaching staff. There probably are going to be a few players at a few positions that you don't think are going to be in a battle, that are going to suddenly be fighting for their job just because it's a new coaching staff and a new system on both sides of the ball. And there's going to be certain players that maybe don't fit the system like they did Rex Ryan's system or before that. And before that, every time there's turnover, there's going to be a few things that surprise you. So maybe that's one, even though John Miller was really tremendous last year, that's going to surprise us come training camp.
So Sammy Watkins slowly returning to full action here. How did the Bills' number one wideout look?
He looked fine. I mean, he didn't have a setback, so I think that's just where you set the bar right now. There was one play on Thursday where he caught a pass, and then afterwards he's like, "Oh, is he limping?" It's like, "Oh, that's just his gait. That's just his walk after a play." Sometimes guys are a little slow, after spring ball. So he looked fine. Again, he wasn't out there a ton, but no bad news is good news. So far, so good.
It's bad that we say that about a number one wide receiver, but that is the case with the China doll of Sammy Watkins.
Yes.
Let's stick, Luds, with the wide receivers. Zay Jones seems to be very impressive. I've been hesitant to give him praise. I haven't seen him in person yet like you guys have. Is there going to be a battle of that number one wide receiver position? Can Zay battle for that top spot?
If Sammy is healthy, no, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think Zay Jones had some good moments, but honestly, I think it's always a stretch for any rookie receiver, unless I know there's been a lot of exceptions in recent years since there's just been some incredible players come out at the top of the draft. But unless you're a top-tier prospect, it normally takes a couple of years for receivers. There's something about that position. There's so much more on their plate, as far as routes and how much they have to do in the route tree compared to college. I thought Zay Jones looked good at times, and other times he looked like a rookie. So I think there's still going to be a learning curve for him. I don't know if we'll see. I still think that he's going to have to battle to earn that number two job. I don't think that's a given, but he has shown some promising things so far.
So a different kind of addition, that receiving core. And Andre Holmes, you mentioned that Zay Jones might not even be the no-brainer number two. What is Andre Holmes? What does he do in this offense? Where is his role?
Yeah, unless there's some more late signings. I saw Eric Decker sign with Tennessee earlier, so it's not going to be him. But unless they still look to fortify that after not signing Jeremy Maclin, I think you just pick the guy, Andre Holmes, who might be the favorite, might be a bit rough for the number two job. But I think right now, coming out of that minicamp, you ask me right now who's going to be the number two receiver, I'd say him.
Interesting.
He's a really physically imposing receiver. You stand next to him, and he's a tall dude. And that's something the Bills have been looking for. I feel like every year for the last decade we've been talking about James Hardy, Stevie Johnson.
Yeah.
They need a big receiver in the red zone. I mean, that's what you want in a number 2 wideout compared to a number 1 guy who's maybe a little faster, a little more of a deep threat. He looked good. I mean, it took a few practices, I think, for some of the receivers to find their groove. At the first spring workout, I didn't think anybody was getting open, and it was like, but as the practices went on, I think Andre Holmes settled in, and he looked pretty good. Again, we'll see. There's a long way to go, and if Zay Jones is able to, speed up that learning curve, he'll certainly push for it. But I thought Holmes was certainly one of the winners of the spring for Buffalo.
Interesting note there. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball then, Luds, and talk about the Bills' number 1 pick, Trey White. I almost said Trey Davis. I did it again. I wrote it, and then I don't know why I got Trey Davis on my mind.
It's very exciting professional athlete, Trey Davis.
We'll stick with Trey White as my brain farts continue. He's gotten high praise from the coaching staff. It looks like from the media, everybody likes him. Let's go the opposite route. Is there an area where Trey White can improve or needs to improve?
That's a good question. I mean, right now, from what we've seen, I hesitate to criticize it all since he's been terrific. I guess the only thing that I'll say right now is that, let's not get too excited because it's June. And I remember
easy to get excited,
we go back to when they drafted Aaron Williams back when he was, originally pegged to be a corner instead of a safety. He was great in the spring. He was great the first 2 days of training camp. Then the rest of training camp was a nightmare for him. Eventually he found his spot at safety a year or two later. I try to ease up on any hyperbole in June. I'll just say that's the one thing I'd say with Tre'Davious White. That said, as my qualifier, he was fantastic these last couple weeks when we've seen him out there. Fit right in. The definite number 1 corner, well ahead of Ronald Darby.
Wow.
Didn't look like a rookie out there. I want to say he had 3 interceptions over the final 3 days of practices they had. He looks tremendous. He looks like the real deal. Awfully impressive so far.
Tyrod Taylor closed out minicamp with a strong performance. McDermott isn't ready to name him the starter, or really anybody. A little coach speak there. But what more does Tyrod have to prove?
He's definitely the starter. That's just McDermott being an NFL coach. He had a real strong finish to the minicamp. Really, he was. There were a couple plays where he and Charles Clay was wide open and he was hitting them. He looked really good to finish out the minicamp, and that's what you want to see. But I tend not to overreact too much. I know some people were saying, "Hey, he's having maybe a slow start to the spring at these practices." I'm glad that people like Bill Parcells and Bill Polian, when they're on ESPN, they say the same thing. So it makes me feel a little better in saying this. But this is the installation process, the way it works in the spring. Every single year, the defense is going to be ahead of the offense early in practices, unless you have Aaron Rodgers out there, unless you have a top quarterback.
Yeah.
Odds are the defense is going to be ahead of the offense early on. So maybe when some people were a little nervous when they would hear about Tyrod at some of these early practices, to me, I chalk that up to just the natural progression of these practices. I mean, if that were to continue at training camp, that's another story. But I think the way the curve went, the way he kind of peaked at the end of this last mini camp, I think he looked good. I still think we know. I mean, he is who he is. I don't think he's going to turn into an all-pro quarterback overnight. But he had a good end of the spring that should put him in a good position for camp.
How about some of the new additions, Luds, that guys that maybe weren't drafted here, some free agent acquisitions? Anybody stand out?
Sorry, Steve, I couldn't hear you there.
Any of the free agents? Make sure I don't my mic on mute. And any of the free agents stand out? Any of these new additions to this Buffalo Bills team? Did anybody stand out in any regard? I know you mentioned Holmes.
Yeah. That's a tough one. I mean, Holmes is the one that jumps out. I mean, you looked at the new safeties. I mean, that's the other one. But again, at no contact OTAs.
Right.
And minimal contact minicamp, Micah Hyde isn't going to be blowing people up back there. But I mean, I think it's safe to say that he hit the ground pretty smoothly. Same with Jordan Poyer. So I mean, they didn't make a ton of splashes in free agency, but what they did do is try and fortify the safety position. And I don't think either of them looked out of place. Again, that's another spot where I'll be more anxious to watch them in the preseason and training camp and all that. But that was certainly a position of need. And again, they didn't look behind the eight ball from what we've seen so far.
And that's good. That's the area I was trying to allude to, I guess, is that defensive back area. And it's interesting that you bring that up. So you're right. I mean, you get into these OTAs and these mini camps, and the excitement is back because football feels like it's back, but we're nowhere close.
No,
that's the problem.
So Sean McDermott drastically changed the training camp schedule this year. What do you make of that schedule?
Yeah, well, hey, you look at every time there's a coaching change in Buffalo, the training camp schedule changes. I mean, maybe some of us, as you know, are used to a little more since we're the ones that have to plan our schedules around what's going on out there. But yeah, I mean, and like a lot of other people heard, I heard the same things about Sean McDermott maybe not exactly loving the current arrangement as much as some other coaches, and that maybe he wanted to even have it be a little shorter than it is. So. I think when you looked at it, am I surprised that maybe the marketing arm of the organization didn't fight for a few more 7 p.m. night practices? I mean, the night practices are what now 5:30, 5:45, something like that.
There.
They're not even true night practices, and as you guys know, those are sights to see. Those are fun practices under the lights. That's when the players, I think, bring out a little more since the stands are packed. So I think that's a shame. But, hey, different coaches like to do different things. McDermott has a lot of morning practices scheduled. I think he's a guy that works out probably at 5:30 in the morning. So it doesn't shock me that maybe he prefers to do stuff in the morning and get that out of the way. But I just think it comes down to a new coach liking to do things his way, and that's really what happens anytime there's a new coach.
Well, just to follow up on that point, we know he's an early riser, as you mentioned. Is this because McDermott doesn't really say a whole lot when he talks? He does a great job of speaking, but not really saying anything of substance there.
Oh, yeah.
Is this a matter of McDermott wanting fewer and fewer eyes on his team? Or is it just...
that's a good question. My gut says no, because if that were the case... there would probably be other things they could do in that regard, whether it would be even less practices at St. John Fisher or trying to close more practices that should be open. So that would be my first instinct. But, hey, different coach, different philosophy. It wouldn't shock me if he wants more closed practices in the future or something to that ilk, because, again, every coach wants something different. And, under the PA agreement, it's changed the last couple of years, but we used to have a lot more open practices in the spring, almost to an absurd amount. I remember during the, Giron era, it's like, why are we covering 22 practices in the spring that don't mean anything, and that's changed. And that's not just McDermott. It happened the last couple of years under Retz too. But I coaches like to be secretive. It wouldn't shock me. I don't think that's, what you're suggesting, I don't think that's out of line. I just don't know if that's necessarily true.
Yeah, it's early under McDermott. I wondered if you had a gut feeling either way. So it's so much different than Rex. It's almost hard for the media guys, and I think to some degree it'll be difficult for the fans just to get a read on this guy because Rex was an open book. McDermott is so scripted almost.
Yeah, well, he is, and I don't want to upset any Bills fans that are listening to this, but he's got some Giron in him. He does, where he talks without saying anything, and without saying anything of substance. And again, there were times. Look at the press conference right after the draft, I believe, or was it either way? It was whenever. The Doug Whaley stuff came to a head right around draft time.
Okay. Yeah.
And he's asked point blank, when did this decision happen? And he said, well, it happened this morning. Come on.
Yeah.
We know that's a lie. We know that's not true. Yeah. We're not stupid. We talk to people. There's a reason why those of us that were there the night before said, see you tomorrow morning. We knew, this was happening. And again, you get it. I get why he doesn't want to say, well, yeah, we knew we were going to fire Doug Whaley a month and a half ago, but we're not stupid. Their reports, were out from scouts knowing they're going to be gone. a month earlier. So I think that, again, I don't think it's necessarily mean spirit or wherever, but that's clearly a case where he wasn't telling the truth. I think you can read into some of his Rochester comments. I don't know if that's completely the truth either. So, hey, he's polite, in the press conferences, but I don't know. Like any coach, I don't think he's being 100% truthful, but that's the NFL, so that's what it is.
Makes sense. Luds, where can we find your stuff?
Sure. I'm on Twitter, MarkLud12, and Bill's Digest. You can get it stores like Wegmans and Tops and all that online through iTunes. And we'll have our training camp preview issue out probably a week into July.
Worth a read.
Beautiful.
Worth a get. Mark Ludwiczak, the editor of Bill's Digest, did not goof the last name. I think I'm 2 for 2 now. Thanks for the time, brother. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anytime, guys. See ya.
All right, 3 blocks in the books. We head to some segments next. A follow-up on the number from last week plus a new number. And Matt and I went to the grocery store this week. It did not go well. We'll explain after the bump music.
You're you, I'm me. This is TBD. Hope you listened to the first couple blocks to learn our names, because you would be enlightened by now. We are back here on the show to be determined.
Just gonna keep going. Is it the intro that never ends?
I couldn't keep up with the theme. Couldn't keep up with the theme.
Episode 16 to be determined at Sports by Bond with that Travs. Matt, time for some segments in the D block. We begin with the B-side story, one that emerged on Sunday night, late Sunday night, if you will, depending on when you go to bed. The Pacers appear to be fully aware that Paul George is leaving Indiana after his final year. He's only got 1 year remaining on the deal. Indiana's so aware, they've started to shop the All-Star forward. Sunday reports surfaced out of ESPN, the mothership, saying that the Pacers are reaching out to the Cavs about a possible deal for Paul George, PG-13. So, 1, does it happen? And 2, who do the Cavs give up?
I think it absolutely has a chance of happening, just because it involves Paul George leaving the Pacers. We've talked about, even on this show, in the grand scheme of things, this show hasn't been on for a year. I mean, it's a pretty recent thing in the grand scheme that he did not have the best relationship with, maybe not the entire team in terms of front office and the roster, but definitely pieces. It definitely seemed like he wanted to get out of there towards the end of this regular season. He had those transgressions with CJ Miles. Or CJ... so there's a CJ Giles and a CJ Miles.
Whoa.
This was CJ Miles.
Okay.
Not Giles, the former Oregon State and Kansas player. This is Miles, came right out of high school.
Good clarification.
Yeah, he had, with the scolding issues he had on 2 occasions at the end of the regular season, so he seems like he wanted to get out there for a long time.
And if you're the Pacers, you want to get something for nothing.
Absolutely. It's still Paul George.
And
like,
go
you
back
can get
to,
something. You can get something.
Go back to that question. Because we know that Paul George is entering the final year of his deal, and we all saw what the Warriors did to the Cavaliers. The Cavs should have all the incentive in the world to try to get PG-13. What do they give up, though? That's the question. Who can you... I said to you before we even flipped on the mics to this, I think Kevin Love goes, but you're of the mindset that he can't go if they want to be successful against the Warriors.
Yeah, I just don't see that happening. It's a very different player. I mean, this is a guy that he showed not a lot. He's not quite the rebounder he was in Minnesota, but he had an 18, a 20 rebound game towards
Kevin
the end
Love,
of this season. Yes.
Okay.
Kevin Love. He's not the same guy he was as a Timberwolf in that regard. And some of that came with him not being as much of just a bully of a doughboy. He doesn't have that. I don't think he can bully guys around as much.
He thinned out a little bit.
Yeah, with less girth. So he's a very different kind of player, but I'm very curious. This is such an early stage in the news coming out about this.
Sure.
Very curious for these Cavs insiders who are in the locker room, who are talking to front office guys, talking to coaches, talking about who the actual pieces are that have legitimate aspirations to be in this deal in terms of going to Indiana. Because if you ask me, I would say Love, Thompson, I would say they're off the table. And obviously your top 2 in Irving and LeBron are. But who knows? I mean, Paul George should be getting a lot, so we'll see.
What about J.R. Smith?
See, J.R. Smith, because he's such a character, I guess, is the best way I can put it, in the fact that he's not a spring chicken. I don't know if a lot of teams are going to want him. He's such a volume scorer. If he scores, he's going to do a lot of erratic things to get to even that level of scoring, that level of production, because there's a lot of games he does not shoot very well percentage-wise. So
he's an interesting piece. I think he couldn't be the center of that deal. There'd have to be other pieces. And again, what's Korver got left? If there's anything left in that deal.
I don't think Korver. He's old. Kind of the same reason for J.R. Smith in that regard.
Yeah.
No spring chicken.
Yeah.
Maybe Amon Shumpert, and he becomes kind of like Rudy Gay, maybe the defensive role player version of Rudy Gay, being a big-name player that seems to be moving around more than you would think for a guy of his caliber.
Now, I don't think the Cavs have a whole lot of draft picks, if I'm not mistaken. So they don't have many pieces to play with other than just guys to trade. So, interesting. But as you mentioned, we have to kind of wait and see. It is very early on in that story.
But so interesting.
Very interesting.
It's Paul George. He's come a long way since that injury.
Yes, that's a good point. We go to buy the numbers. The number this week is 6, as in the number of games the Yankees have dropped in a row on this West Coast trip. The Bombers beginning that road trip with a nice 5-3 win last Tuesday, I believe it was.
Nice. And,
in a win over the Angels. Subsequently, they've dropped the next 6, 2 against a banged-up Angels team without Mike Trout, and then 4 against one of the worst teams in the AL, in the Oakland, I almost said Raiders, in the Oakland Athletics.
I don't know if they're still playing the same barn, but I think they at least used to, because you have the gaudy upper deck that for athletics games gets covered by that tarp.
Yeah.
So, not too far from the truth there.
What do you make of New York dropping 6 straight? I mean, I get it's 162. There's going to be inevitable that you're going to have ups and downs, ebbs and flows to the season, but this Bombers team seemed like everything was going right for them.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, Tanaka, early in the season, lost one early, but then went off and won 5 decisions in a row, but 0-6 in his last 7 starts. And this is a guy who a lot of people, because he was so good overseas, came over as a little bit an older rookie. He's still a pretty young player in terms of his years in the MLB, and he had a very good year last year. But that's absurd over the last 7 games. That's not what you've really seen Tanaka as a Yankee deal with. What's the team? I mean, Ellsbury, he's older, but he's not playing right now. Greg Bird, a very good young first baseman, he's not playing right now. And Chris Carter hit 41 home runs last year in Milwaukee. His numbers are okay power-wise, but definitely not what they thought he would be probably coming over from the Brewers. So you have pieces that aren't there. CC, another guy at the end of his career, but he was in 7-2 before he went in the DL.
Yeah.
So
he looked good.
Not a huge group of guys not on there because of injury, but still, it's definitely not enough for this.
How do they get out of this 6-game slump?
Well, hopefully get Gary Sanchez back to what he was when he was just unbelievable at the end of last year.
Is it a matter of health, or is it a matter of just getting the groove back, so to speak?
Well, it's still a pretty young, I would say, young rotation. So you got to get these guys playing on the same page, because that's what was really good. Obviously, you have all these really good young pitchers, or young hitters, I should say, but they were getting a lot of good starts game after game after game. Montgomery and, Pineda, CC, he's not there right now, but they really need to get it going in terms of rotation, because, Tanaka has just been the tale of 2 cities so far, and we're not even that far into the season.
New York returning home on Tuesday to face those same Los Angeles of Anaheim Angels, whatever the heck it is.
It's ridiculous.
LAA? The Angels, the LAAA Angels. So the number this week is 6. A follow-up to last week's number, if I may. You may recall last week's number was 127, as in the number of dollars that Cavs guard Dante Jones made for the postseason in one regular season game. We broke down the math. So within 19 games that he dressed for, Jones averaged $6.68 per game.
And
this was after fines. I just want to further explain this. After fines. He didn't sign a contract for $127. He ended up with $127 after he was fined $9,000 and signed a contract for $9,127.
One of those fines came from him not being in the game but getting thrown out. So it's just absurd. And last week,
both fines were from him not being in the game. He never got fined when he was on the floor.
It's ridiculous. And last week, I don't know if it was great for production of radio production. Me just time and time again being like, I can't believe this. This is absurd. He's a professional athlete, especially the NBA. with the most recent CBA, no less. $668 per game?
Yeah, now, LeBron said he was going to cover the first 6,000 of that fine. So I didn't do the math with just the $3,127 because it's not as fun. The fun part is that we assume he made $127 for the year. Now, let me ask you this. Let's assume he made the $9,127. If they had won the ring, the championship ring would have been worth probably double what he made for the year.
Gosh.
Which is insane to think about.
He goes out and pawns it.
Exactly. So just to follow up
Smelts
to just to follow up to the number that we had from last week. We jumped to Get Off My Lawn. And if you're a listener of the show, you know that I don't go very many places. I'm home, I'm at the gym, I maybe go for a run, and I go to the grocery store. So these are where my observations come from in this Get Off My Lawn segment. This week, we're back to the grocery store, but there's a twist, if you will. Before the show, Matt and I have to run and go get some groceries to cook for dinner and whatnot, just so we can have a little nourishment later on in the evening and whatnot. So we go on Father's Day to the local grocery store, and it is slammed. I mean, carts everywhere. The parking lot is full. This is jam-packed. And we walk into Wegmans, and we grab a hand cart. We grab a small cart, not the big ones, but a small one. And we're getting a few items. We're getting in, we're getting out. We don't have a whole lot of time to be there. We want to get in and get out. And this is what I noticed during our trip, is that women in particular, and guys are guilty of this too, but women in particular do not pay attention to where they are driving their cart when they're in the grocery store. They're either looking left, they're looking right, they're looking for olives, they're looking for salsa. They have no clue where they're actually driving these things. I almost got hit several times.
I mean, it was dangerous. It was dangerous. And I will have to say, there's a disclaimer here. I was there. I had cart duty. Today, and I was all over the place, and almost intentionally so.
You're a little wild.
I was being very unproductive intentionally.
But you
make a lot of jokes.
Listen,
but even with that, definitely not as dangerous.
It was crazy. You didn't hit anyone. At least you were paying attention.
Yeah. I was even doing some wheelies. Like I was really flaunting.
All right.
I was doing that stuff and not hitting anybody.
It's amazing to me how people can't pay attention.
No regard for human life.
They just exactly. They have no regard for where they're going. All they're worried about is looking left for an item, or looking right, looking down at their list maybe. It's amazing to me that nobody actually pays it. And listen, it's not like there are 15 people in this grocery store. There are probably 500 people in this grocery store.
Jam-packed, jelly-packed,
it's a Sunday,
marmalade-packed. Like, come on.
Whatever it is. It's Sunday. It's always going to be packed, but it's extra packed because it's Father's Day and everyone's trying to get, some meats to grill. They're trying to get some treats, whatever.
You get some morsels for Pops.
Yeah, cold six-pack.
Some Pappy morsels.
Cold six-pack for the old man, whatever it might be. Nobody's looking ahead of them and using their periffs. You got to use the periffs, people.
We say periffs on this a lot. And
I don't listen.
It's not for naught.
Right, exactly. I don't usually go to the grocery store during the high traffic, high volume times because it's a disaster. We didn't have a choice. We got a show to do here.
Yeah.
We had to go when
Gotta
we
do
went.
the deed. Gotta do.
I'm flabbergasted at how many people just don't pay attention. Do yourself a solid if you don't believe me. Or don't do it's not a solid, but follow through on this experiment. Go on a Saturday. Go on a Sunday when it's jam-packed. You'll be dodging for your life.
Hey, I would say...
I'm training for a race here. I almost got my legs taken out 3 or 4 times.
I would say make them feel bad. Take a tick. Take a little bit and then just go down. And just hold a limb. Make them feel bad. That'll show them.
Like an NBA guy in the lane, just take the charge?
Gosh,
You're saying to take the charge?
We're watching these documentaries of NBA back in the day. Little Celtics Lakers even. This past week.
Oh,
and they are like brawling.
Well, that's what I felt like.
They're like brawling hard.
And we weren't even you get a couple people reaching for like the sweet corn and it's an all-out battle.
Hey, you gotta keep the shoulders. Gotta keep the shoulders out. You got a little LeBeaus.
I am unaware of how dangerous the grocery store is during high volume, high traffic times of the day.
I got to make a bunch of yogurt jokes today, which is great. this new Yo play or something. Like, was it called Kefir? Kefur. Made a little 24 joke, Kiefer Sutherland. It was just really gets a man of the people.
All right, so I don't want to blame this all on chicks because it's not all chicks.
No.
Although it was mainly housewives is what I observed.
And age, I would say old men and old women involved.
Just people in general. Pay attention at the grocery store when you're driving a cart. It's, especially when you get the big ones. And don't even get me started with the ones that have like the race car and then the kart.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay,
I don't know why you grabbed that one, Matty.
I'm
but
a
it's all
childlike
right.
sense of wonder. You let it happen.
All right. So you guys get off my lawn. Let's go to Twitter takes, and this one comes from the world of golf. Disappointing U.S. Open for Rory McIlroy, but boy, did he respond on the old Twitter. He owned Steve Elkington, I believe it is on Twitter.
Elkington?
Huh?
Elkington?
Elkington. He tweeted, Rory is so bored playing golf without Tiger. The threshold is probably 4 majors with $100 million in the bank. Rory responding in spectacular fashion. More like $200 million. Oh, just owned. Not bad for a bored 28-year-old. Plenty more where that came from. And along with this tweet, he tweeted out a picture of his 4 major victories. Elkington responding a little later saying, new N-E-W, not the correct one. Knew you were a money guy. Jack won 18, never mentioned his total cash. It was $5 million. Rory, of course, responding and had to. Going right back at him, saying, that's why Jack designed hundreds of golf courses, and it's new, K-N-E-W, mustn't have taught grammar in the 50s. And just owned. Rory, kudos for the Twitter game. I like it.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I think one of the pictures, the screenshots he showed in one of these tweets, was of Wikipedia. And his exploits on the golf course, on many golf courses, can be found in many places besides Wikipedia.
Well, it's a quick place to go.
Because if Steve Elkington, who I guess if we mentioned the 50s, a little bit an older gentleman, he can, if he knew more about the internet, he would really make that point about Wikipedia.
Well, he certainly doesn't know how to spell. I mean, this was an atrocious attempt by Elkington. How about Rory, the Twitter game better than the golf game this weekend?
Oof.
Not good if you're Rory, but hey, kudos for the Twitter game. I mean, that's something. That is something, my man.
Get it. Got it. Good.
All right, since this is the last block, we will jump right to legs, so long as I can find it in the rundown here.
I found it.
NBA draft this week.
Yeah.
What night is the NBA draft?
Thursday
night, NBA draft. The Celtics held the top overall pick until they made a trade this weekend. It blew up on Twitter. What was it, Saturday night? This past Saturday night. Sixers getting the number 1 overall pick. The Celtics, in return, getting just a nice return here, a nice haul. They're going to get the Sixers number 3 this year, so they still get a top 3 pick from this year's draft, a first-round pick in 2018, and that's via the Lakers. And if the Lakers pick doesn't fall between 2 and 5, the Celtics going to get a 2019 first-round pick via Sacramento. So this web of trades is phenomenal, but the Celtics ultimately get a nice haul, and they're probably going to end up with, Josh Jackson at number 3, which isn't a bad forward take.
Oh, absolutely not. And plus, a lot of people talk about Josh Jackson. Yeah, he's very bad from the free throw line, but another big-time jump shooting aspect of the game, he, in the last, 12 games with the Jayhawks this past college basketball season, went from 24% from deep to 51% from deep. I'm pretty sure those are around those numbers, and he, I think, around tripled up his makes, too. That's not just because he's taking less shots. So I think that really helps. I like him a lot more than Jaylen Brown in terms of a guy that's going to be a very good effort, defense, athleticism, at least vertically kind of guy on the wing.
1 and 2, Fultz Ball? Is that how you see it playing out?
A lot of people don't like Ball. They just think he's such a wild card, and then who knows where he's going to end up going when it's all said and done. But I love his skill set. I think he should be going at least 2. I mean, he's not going to go 1. It's a done deal.
All right.
Markel.
We'll jump to a little more local stuff here then. Cuse guys, Tyler Lydon, you have down here maybe in the 20s. Andrew White, possible second-rounder.
Yeah, so Andrew White, I think it really hurts him, especially in this day and age. The NBA Combine didn't used to be very much of anything. Now it's pretty big. And it was weird because he was made an injury replacement. And a lot of guys did not end up going, but he was not slotted in to the actual participants. He was there in Chicago, which helps a little bit. I don't know. I mean, Andy Routins was selected by the Knicks out of left field. And I think, at least in terms of a guy who can be a role player on the perimeter offensively, Andrew White's a lot better than him. So we'll see Thomas Bryant.
Hold on, before we get to Bryant, you think Lydon goes in the 20s? Nothing earlier than that?
I think in the 20s. I mean, and this is a guy, it did not hurt him to come back from a second year.
Okay.
Because
All
a lot of times that's what happens. But this is just where the NBA is going these days.
All right, former Bishop Kearney star, Indiana star, Thomas Bryant, also declaring for the draft and whatnot. You think he is another, maybe a second-round guy?
Yeah, he's going to be top 40. I'm seeing a lot in terms of late 30s, maybe the Celtics, maybe those 76ers, ironically. Both teams involved, and they have so many picks, I don't think it really matters. The trade along with that. But look at 28, I think it's 28, with the Los Angeles Lakers. They could use another project, but potential in terms of a young center. They have Ivica Zubac is a guy like him, and maybe not in full skill set, but he's young, but has a lot of potential. Project guy. Timofey Mozgov's not going to be there forever.
Did Bryant work out for the Lakers?
That was one of his first workouts.
Okay, so I did see something.
So we'll
about
see.
that.
And that's a guy, unfortunately, like Tyler Lydon. He lost a little bit of zhuzh, and he's not going to be as high maybe as if he came out after 1 year.
Yeah, the hype not there. You get a little more tape on him, which is sad because a guy chooses to go back and try to work on his skill set a little bit.
Yeah.
So, reason to pay attention in the second round then, not just the first couple.
I care until 60, baby. That's why Isaiah Thomas was taken. Woo, Celts.
All right, our thanks to a pair of FOTS for their knowledge today. Tom Martin, WIVB sports anchor, reporter, the host of the Oddcast podcast.
Didn't say it Britishly.
Podcast. God, I
Britishly?
that up, I know.
All British-like?
Our thanks to fellow FOTS Mark Ludwiczak for his talk of the Bills and their minicamp. He is the editor of Bills Digest. Our thanks to the guys at $10 Tea Club. Make sure you head over to $10tclub.com. Use the promo code TBD. Save yourself 15% on your first purchase. Great teas, real cheap. They live up to the name. My thanks to Maddie for showing up. Make sure you check out This Every Monday. Google Play, iTunes, download, subscribe, rate, and review. Check out the social media links at TBD_show, To Be Determined Show on Instagram. Email the show, tbdmailman@gmail.com. Check out the post-game press conference on YouTube on a Wednesday. Got to search To Be Determined. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Make sure you check out the Friday show on Friday, Saturday, whenever we get it out there. My thanks to Maddie for showing up. Our thanks to the senior producer, Mitch Beluco, the executive producer at Sports by Mom. Later, boys.
And girls.